Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so excited you're tuning in today because we're about to dive into one of the most fascinating, literally high-stakes biological events happening inside your body right now. We are talking about the microscopic hero's journey of a blood clot, taking it from the exact moment of an injury all the way through to complete healing. Let's kick things off with a question that honestly might seem kind of simple at first, but is actually deeply profound. Why is it that we stop bleeding within minutes of a cut, but our blood doesn't just keep clotting until we're completely solid, right? It's literally a matter of life and death. I mean, if you can't clot, you face continuous bleeding, which is what we see in patients with hemophilia. But on the flip side, if you clot too much, you run the risk of dangerous blockages, known as thrombosis. So how does your body know exactly when to start and exactly when to hit the brakes?
Well, the answer is hemostasis. It's the physiological process that stops the bleeding, all while maintaining the rest of your blood in a fluid state inside those blood vessels. So the really crucial takeaway here is that hemostasis isn't just about making a clot. It's the ultimate biological balancing act. We're talking about an incredibly precise, high-wire dance between clot formation and clot destruction.
To master all of this, we're going to follow a really structured chronological path. We'll start with the hemostasis balancing act, move into primary hemostasis, the plug, secondary hemostasis, the cement, fibrinolysis, decoding laboratory tests, and finally, we'll look at what happens when hemostasis fails.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the Hemostasis Balancing Act.
Okay, before we zoom in on the microscopic details, we really need a foundational roadmap. There are exactly 4 physiological stages of hemostasis. Now, I absolutely love a good mnemonic to make learning easier, so here is your cheat code, VCPF. Or if you want an easy way to remember it in your head, very pretty clots fade. That stands for vascular spasm, platelet plug formation, coagulation, and fibrinolysis. I want you to keep that very pretty clots fade anchor in the back of your mind, because we're going to follow those 4 exact steps for the rest of this explainer.
Moving right along to Section 2, primary hemostasis, also known as the plug.
Imagine you've just sliced your finger making dinner. Ouch, right? Your body's immediate split-second emergency response is vascular spasm. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a leaking water hose out in your garden. What is your very first instinct? You squeeze it tight to stop the flow. Well, your blood vessels do the exact same thing. Within seconds of that injury, the damaged vessel releases chemicals like endothelin, serotonin, and thromboxane A2. These chemicals force the vessel to constrict, making the opening way smaller and instantly reducing blood loss. It essentially buys the rest of the hemostasis emergency team precious time to arrive.
And arrive they do, usually within just 1 to 5 minutes. This brings us to the platelet phase, which is driven by our next cheat code, AAP. That's adhesion, activation, and aggregation. First up, adhesion. The exposed collagen acts kind of like a beacon, and this critical protein called von Willebrand factor, or VWF, acts exactly like biological Velcro, just sticking platelets right to the injury site. Second is activation. These platelets suddenly transform from smooth little discs into these spiky cells, releasing ADP and calcium to call for backup. And finally, aggregation. The platelets link their spiky arms together using fibrinogen bridges. The final result? A temporary but super effective platelet plug.
Which brings us to Section 3, secondary hemostasis. Let's talk about the cement.
So that primary plug we just built, it's actually pretty weak, and a strong pulse could literally wash it right away. It is time to bring in the cement. To build the cement, the body uses a whole cascade of coagulation factors. Try this mnemonic. Freshers party tonight. Come, let's sing, and call seniors, please have fun. This perfectly helps us remember factors 1 through 13. But wait, do you notice something kind of weird missing there? There is no factor 6. Why? Well, it's actually a fascinating historical quirk. Scientists discovered what they thought was factor 6, only to realize later on that it was really just activated factor 5. So they just dropped the number 6 entirely. Crazy, right?
Now, these factors actually work in 2 distinct pathways. We've got the intrinsic pathway and the extrinsic pathway. The intrinsic pathway happens on the inside. It's triggered by internal damage, like exposed collagen, and it's this slow, cascading domino effect of factors 12 to 11 to 9 to 8. But the extrinsic pathway, that is your incredibly fast outside emergency response triggered by sudden tissue trauma. And my absolute favorite cheat code for remembering this one is 3 plus 7 equals heaven. Factor 3 plus factor 7 activates factor 10.
In factor 10 is exactly where these two pathways merge into what we call the common pathway. Think of a Y-shaped road coming together. Whether you came from the slow intrinsic side or that fast extrinsic side, you end up right at factor 10. From there, it's just a straight shot down. 10 activates 5, which activates 2, which activates 1. Now, factor 1 is fibrinogen, which turns into these long, incredibly sticky threads of fibrin. Finally, factor 13 sweeps in to cross-link everything together, officially turning our fragile little platelet plug into a stabilized, rock-hard fibrin net.
Now listen, if you take only one thing away from this entire coagulation cascade, please let it be this. Thrombin is the boss. Seriously. Thrombin is activated factor 2, and it is the master enzyme. Literally everything revolves around it. It activates multiple other factors, it supercharges the platelets, and it's the direct catalyst that converts that floating fibrinogen into the solid fibrin net. Without thrombin, the whole factory just shuts down.
Next up, section 4, fibrinolysis, clearing the clot.
All right, so the bleeding has stopped, the cement is laid, and over the next few days, your tissue completely heals underneath. But we can't just leave that biological concrete sitting in our blood vessels forever, right? The body needs to safely demolish the clot and restore normal blood flow, and it does this using plasmin. You can think of plasmin exactly like a microscopic Pac-Man, just happily eating away at that stubborn fibrin net. And as it chomps through the clot, it spits out little waste fragments. The most famous of these fragments, it's called a D-dimer. Now definitely keep that D-dimer in mind because it's super vital for our next step.
Moving on to section 5, decoding laboratory tests.
Let's step out of the microscopic world for a second and into the hospital. How do doctors actually measure all of this incredible physiology in real life? Well, they use these high-yield tests. Whenever a patient is on blood thinners, we have to monitor them incredibly carefully. If a patient takes warfarin, doctors measure their PT, or prothrombin time, which checks that fast extrinsic pathway. But if a patient is on IV heparin, doctors look at the APDT test, which measures the slow intrinsic pathway. And hey, remember that Pac-Man waste product we just talked about? If a doctor draws blood and finds a super high D-dimer level, that is a massive red flag. It tells us that a clot was recently formed and is currently breaking down somewhere inside the patient's body.
And while we're on the subject of lab medicine and pharmacology, I have to share an absolute classic pearl of wisdom with you, beautifully summarized by just 4 digits, 1972. What exactly does this mean? Well, it represents the specific coagulation factors that absolutely require vitamin K to function. Factor 10, factor 9, factor 7, and factor 2. It's such an elegant little memory trick. And that drug warfarin we just mentioned, it works entirely by blocking vitamin K, thereby shutting down these 1972 factors.
Finally, we arrive at section 6, when hemostasis fails. So, what actually happens when the body's natural systems are the ones that break down? Because this hemostasis system is so intensely complex, just a single missing piece can cause absolute chaos. For instance, if you're genetically missing factor 8, you have hemophilia A, which leads to really severe bleeding. If your body makes defective biological Velcro, remember that von Willebrand factor we talked about earlier? You have von Willebrand disease. That means your platelets simply cannot stick to an injury. On the terrifying other end of the spectrum, we have DIC. This is where a systemic trigger causes all the body's factors to clot at once, consuming absolutely everything, which ironically causes the patient to bleed out. And of course, there's thrombosis, where clots form abnormally in your veins or arteries, causing things like deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolisms, or strokes. Okay, to really tie this all together, let's walk through our chronological memory palace one last time. Imagine that cut on your finger again. In seconds, the hose is squeezed, that's the vascular spasm. In minutes, the platelets stick with the VWF Velcro to form the primary plug. Then the clotting factors cascade down, all directed by thrombin the boss to pour that fibrin cement. Days later, the healing completes. And finally, plasmin the Pac-Man arrives to eat up the fibrin, leaving behind that D-dimer evidence. So there it is, from injury to plug to cement to cleanup. Which brings us to our final thought for today. The very next time you get a simple paper cut, don't just slap a bandage on it and walk away. I want you to stop and ask yourself, which exact stage of this microscopic hero's journey is happening inside you right at that very second? Are your vessels spasming? Are your platelets getting spiky? Is thrombin laying down with cement? It is just a staggering, beautiful cascade of life-saving biology happening right beneath your skin. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I will see you in the next one.